How are you? Happy to be in Turin?
Yes, it's my first time.
What, with the sun?
It's so nice. I live in Germany, which I also like very much, but Italian lunch is better.
I guess so. And dinners as well.
I will find out.
Yeah, you will. Okay, I don't know if there are still people waiting outside. Otherwise, maybe we could start. Thank you so much for joining. So they give me the green light to go. Thank you so much for joining this session and for staying with us this afternoon for the third session of the IDS industry. Here in Turin, we are very happy to be hosted by the Turin International Film Festival and to have our distinguished international guests, very trustful friends of IDS wherever we will go in Italy. So hopefully there will be more occasions in the future. With this session, we would like to go a little bit deeper into the discussion that was done before about documentaries being the best friends in a way of public service media. And we would like to go a little bit deeper by showing some examples and some data of how documentaries can actually help public service media to make this role of creating informed and aware citizens with, while having a very strong return in investment in a way. So we want to have an overview of and some examples how that is possible, because we know that documentaries can raise very important discussions. They can have very strong impacts on societies. They can raise awareness. They can inform in very trusted ways. They can change our points of view. And so they help citizens to develop a critical thinking, which is very much what is needed, especially in societies which are now in crisis of shared values, and they are also in search of sometimes very shaky democracies around the world. And so it's no surprise that authoritarian regimes are not only trying to silence journalists, but they're also often trying to silence documentary producers, because in a way they help shape a critical citizenship that can be sometimes against the mainstream kind of point of view. So it's a very important discussion, and it's a very important asset for public service media in their role of shaping this critical aspect of the societies. And as we've seen before, this genre is really living a golden age because of this growing appetite that is coming also thanks to the OTT and the platforms that are producing a lot of quality content. So we want to hear a little bit more about this. Also because the documentaries have this capacity of reach wide audiences, both nationally and internationally, and a lot of the times also by not having very high production value. So in a way, it checked the boxes of a lot of the things that public service media are looking for. So I'm very happy to be joined today by our panelists. Bridget O'Shea, who's co-director of the quite recent Documentary Association of Europe, which was actually launched just before the pandemic changed everything. It was launched at Berlinale in 2020, and as you can read on their website, it was born as a collective effort to secure the best conditions for documentary filmmaking and unite a community in the face of an ever-changing audiovisual market. So they've been really active during the whole pandemic in very difficult conditions, but they are already now, I can say, very well established. A place in the documentary space has become a reference, although the time has not been easy and the time has not been long. So welcome, Bridget. Then we have Claudia Bucher, Deputy Director at Documentary in Strasbourg in Arte. We heard before in the panel before, and so also Claudia knows the IDS since a long time. And of course, we don't need to introduce Arte as one of the leading channels in Europe to support documentaries. And Caroline Béard, Director International Co-Productions and Documentary Acquisitions in France Télévisions. also introduced in the previous panel, and also a very good friend of IDS and Italian independent producers. Thank you for being here and for participating in the discussion. We've heard it before, the transformation of the audiovisual landscape has changed many things, but it has also challenged the public media to find different ways to deliver content across platforms, across audiences, the quality content that you provide as public service media. So it's a very interesting time actually to be involved in the documentary space, we feel, and we will see from you how you're actually interpreting this different role that you're having in a continuous changing media. So I would like to start with Bridget, because you with Day, you have a general overview of the European landscape from an independent producer's perspective, because in association of independent producers around Europe. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more in this, challenging, but at the same time very interesting time. How do you see the trends that this super genre, in a way, is heading?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Doc It. And my co-director, Marianne Schmidt, is also here. So we are, in fact, a kind of large delegation of Day people attending the Italian doc screenings. So first, I think the most important thing to say is that actually we're not a producers association. We're open to everybody working in the nonfiction field. So you could be an extremely independent editor working in the Carpathian Mountains, or you could be Arte, and you can all be members of our association. We don't distinguish between or champion only one profession. And the reason for that is that we feel that actually kind of not the greatest threat, but like the greatest challenge to making documentary films is fiction, and always being kind of sequestered into either fiction production schemes, or always working kind of in dialogue with enormous budgets and enormous market share. And so for that reason, we decided, when we decided to form our new association, and this was in 2019, in what I like to refer to as the before times, before the pandemic, we thought it was important actually that everybody inside of the sector get back together to talk about how we are kind of going to get out of this mess a little bit, which is that I'm 36 years old and I'm like a middle-class woman, and essentially I am the target audience for Netflix. But I also feel that we have to defend the rights and territory and space of public media, which plays an inherently vital role in a democratic society and the kind of world that I would like to live in, and the one that I would like to leave behind for our next generations. And I know that those values are not only mine inside of our industry, as we are mostly not motivated by money. So that means that we are working in a different kind of economy. And so in order to protect the space that we have and to make up for the territory that has already been lost, it felt really important that there is a space where all people working in nonfiction can talk together and idealize the kind of future that we would like to live in and work in. And that means that what we need to do is actually work together to change things. And that means that kind of this age of competition, who's going to win? Will it be television? Will it be theatrical? Will it be platforms? For us, has to end. And what we are more interested in is working in a period of collaboration. And when we're talking about, and I can say a little bit more about the association in a moment, but when we're talking about, how do we make sure that European documentaries can be competitive, what we actually need to do is pool all of our resources together and work together inside of this challenging framework. And so,
which very much resonates, which was been saying before in the previous panel. So it's really about getting together to be stronger wherever
exactly.
your circle is.
Because we work in an ecosystem, and the ecosystem is three-dimensional and it's moving. So we need every part of that ecosystem to survive and thrive, or else if one part falls out, you have a climate collapse, essentially. I mean, we were very inspired, again, in 2019 when the world seemed so catastrophic, and yet little did we know what kind of catastrophe would come next. We were very inspired by like the climate change movement, where you do think about, this kind of, there was a generation gap that was growing between producers who knew what it was like to work for one national broadcaster or one national funder versus those who have always co-produced and always worked in collaboration. And so we wanted to get out of kind of these discussions about whose fault it is, that public broadcasting budgets are shrinking and that like the market share for non-independent productions is growing. And instead of trying to find blame or fault, get back to like a constructive space where you can say, okay, dear film festivals, you need to pay screening fees. Dear broadcasters, you need to declare less rights or exploit them in a different way. Should we be satisfied in the German-speaking territory, for example, where you have 90 million speakers of the language inside of Europe with selling 14,000 cinema tickets? Like, should that be declared a successful documentary? And so we had larger systemic questions that we felt could only be answered inside an association where people could meet on eye level, and also in a place where we respect even though we can talk about Fortress Europe at the drinks later, like where we respect each other's differences and where we respect each other's local, as I say, idiosyncrasies, without trying to homogenize and create a European homogenous entity, because the continent of Europe is not a melting pot. We respect people's languages and borders, even if at the moment that's being grossly exploited for political gains. So anyway, long story short, that is kind of the history of our association. And one of the first things that we set out to do was to invite documentary associations from across Europe to meet with us last year, so that we could compare notes on what kind of the situation is in the national context inside the European Union, but also of our closest neighbours. So also, our name is confusing. We call ourselves the Documentary Association of Europe, but we don't care which passport you hold, and we also don't care where you live. So if you are Tunisian living in France, you can still be part of our association. Or in my case, I'm Australian living in Germany, so if we were only open to Europeans, I couldn't be a part of my own association. So we wanted to bring these networks together to compare notes, because we work 100% on a voluntary basis, and we also were trying to maintain an independence without kind of the influence of one particular sector. And what we wanted to do was hear from people on the ground what is going on. And so in the end, we spent 2 days together with 20 associations from across Europe, and the selection of those was quite arbitrary. It was a combination of people inside of our networks and also people who came forward in our initial kind of membership push. And there, one of the first things that became very clear was that like the national average budget for a feature-length documentary varies in Europe between 30,000 euros and 500,000 euros. So that means already we're not on an even playing field. And so no matter what Creative Europe wants to tell us, it's like a fallacy. So I think that one of the things that we're going to spend now, our next kind of, we call it the beta phase of our association, will be to collect proper scientific data so that we can understand how the seats of power inside of our industry are working. Because we have often financing from public broadcast television or television inside of our budgets, often data isn't collected in like the theatrical catching zones for data in Europe. So actually it's very difficult for us to describe how the documentary landscape really looks in 2021, mostly because nobody has been looking. So this is something really interesting that we're on a journey towards now. And then also maybe to say just a few things about us. So as you rightly said, Laura, we were founded in 2020 at the European Film Market with the 7 original members of our association, and now we have grown to more than 400. We are very pleased that DocIT also attended this first summit that we organized last year, and we welcome new members. So if you feel that you need to, or you're obliged, I would say, to work outside of your national context, that's something that all of our members have in common. So they're co-producing films, or they're shooting outside of their own national borders, or showing films at European film festivals. And our hope, oh, thank you, this is our website. I thought maybe you won't be familiar with us, so we thought we would show it to you. But we really believe that it's a really optimistic time, and it's a time where you can be really excited about the future of documentary. But one thing that's for sure is the next generation of audiences and film professionals need more. We just need more, and so we can no longer work kind of under these conditions of exploitation as authors, but also people working inside of film festivals are extremely exploited. There's just a lot of work to do to create a future that's more equitable and more fair and more just. But the only way that that can happen is if we move away from the idea that competition will get us there, and that European dominance will come from a competitive spirit, because that's not who we are. Europeans, my ideal European is somebody who is collaborative and who is open to discussions with their neighbors, and trying to move away from these kind of old colonial frameworks that are no longer serving us, I would say.
Yeah, and it's also about what we have in common in our diversity, right? I mean, that's really the richness of a continent like Europe, which is, has different histories, different languages, but some shared values. And in a way, this European association of documentaries, or doing this work together, is also bringing back at the center the values that we share, and being able to communicate them on a more international level.
Yeah, and I know Marion will get into this more tomorrow with the documentary associations who are attending the Italian doc screenings, and so I don't want to take too much away from their content tomorrow. But one of the things that is really interesting, if you think about what are the assets of European documentary, Arte, of course, is an asset. Our public broadcasting system is an asset, but also, the film and television school in Estonia that pumps out amazing filmmakers from the Baltic countries, Belarus, Ukraine, is also amazing. And so what the association, I think, is trying to do is really collect European assets and define them and make them accessible to people, also for cultural lobbying. This idea that you can develop audiences and you can develop a strengthened kind of structure for documentary filmmaking outside of just looking at it through a lens of finances, which is super important, of course. But there's a lot going on in Europe, and we can define what we think our assets are and what we need to work on together. And it doesn't have to be always through the lens of an association that's, also all respect to the unions and the producers associations, because we collaborate with them and we like that. But again, we feel it's really important that there's a place where all people working in documentary can come together, because our threats are bigger than each other. Sure, festivals have now disturbed the distribution landscape with their online screenings, and sure, public broadcasters also have changed the landscape with the catch-up libraries. But as you rightfully said, the political threats and the market threats from fiction is, for me, much more pressing, because somebody has to keep kind of the overview of the whole ecosystem and make sure that each part is working.
Despite there are associations in Europe that actually, in different countries, that actually have both producers for documentaries and fiction, and they work together to be stronger on a national level. So it's interesting to see how different countries react to these threats, sometimes also as an opportunity to actually have a stronger lobbying internally on their political level.
The Netherlands has a great example of that. They're called NAPA, which is the Association of Independent Producers in the Netherlands, and they, merged. So XR, documentary, animation, and fiction, in order to work for the best conditions together.
Yeah, but tomorrow morning there will be a panel about, with Marian, who's your co-director, who is here, and several association of producers in Europe, where this discussion will be brought further. And it's really about this collaboration and this getting together to become stronger, to get the opportunities, but also face the threats, a little bit like the broadcasters are doing on a European level. So it's really important that these two things go in parallel, communicating with each other, because as you rightly say, you operate in the same ecosystem, and so you need to be working together individually as categories, but also have a dialogue with each other on a constant level.
Yeah, and then I guess to kind of try and swing back to the topic of our discussion today about documentaries, European documentaries being the golden eggs of the audiovisual output, let's say, of Europe. Of course, I 100% believe that. I'm dedicated to the cult of documentary, and I ask you all to join us. But I think there is the fact that I use, or that we use in the association when we are speaking to powerful entities, is that European documentaries are the best traveling products that we have. If you look at the Oscars in the last 2 years, the examples of Collective and Honeyland to catch the hearts and minds of an international audience is extraordinary. And so you can't ignore that. And I just don't know why we aren't being more supportive of these incredibly entrepreneurial people who are working not just against, speaking truth to power, which is always the hardest job to have, and also kept in economic slavery, because I try to speak freely. I can think of almost no production company in Europe that survives alone producing theatrical documentaries. So we have the handicap and burden of working inside of a system that doesn't really support our genre, and yet we're outperforming fiction in every way. So how can you not be optimistic and excited about the future? But if we keep working in the echo chambers of our own professions, then we also aren't helping ourselves to get over this hurdle of, how do we take what is rightfully ours, which is, at least I hope, a huge chunk of the AVMS directive money that will flow back into Europe, because I don't see Netflix as a threat to public broadcast television in the sense of content, because now audiences anyway are so atomized and diffused that, I want to watch reality television, but I also want to watch Cow, and that's fine, and I need access to both. And I need both to keep being produced, but not one at the expense of another.
Yeah, and as you were rightly saying, the resources that the documentaries can access is still too low compared to what it can actually bring out as a result. I mean, you were mentioning two titles that one made the Oscar, the other one made to the nomination of the Oscar. So even the outreach and the impact of these titles can be very strong. And this nicely brings me to, we have some data from Italy that I would like to show, which give us a little bit the panorama of factual and unscripted and documentary making in Italy. And if we can show the slides, please. They were very kindly given by APA that presented this survey in MIA last October. And so, no, that's not the one. It's about the trend, how independent production in Italy is growing, both on the linear and the OTT. But it's not Intrattenimento. Okay, it's not the right one. Yeah. So here you can see how much the documentary is actually a major genre on the OTT. We heard this morning how much the penetration of this OTT is, and now we also know that in that framework there is a lot of documentary content, which is also why we have said it before, this appetite is growing because the content is there, is a lot of it is actually quality content. So it shows how much this genre is becoming a mainstream genre as well. But when we come with financing, we see that there are 23% of the financed titles in Europe is documentary, but only represent 4.4% of the money injected in the system. So we could say, of course, it's golden egg because it's cheap and it's affordable. We could also say it's underfinanced because that means that these titles are done on amounts which maybe could be a bit more important if the resources were there. So we could see it in both ways. And this is where the money in Europe comes from when we talk about documentaries and unscripted. So it's mainly, and this is not a surprise, of course, public funds, and a little bit of it come from Europe. So this is just to give an idea about, and this is for you now, to give you an idea about why we're talking about golden eggs, because with the results that we can reach in terms of outreach, of prices, of impact, and everything that we want to reach, or you want to reach at public service media, then the resources are not yet there, and when they are, maybe they're a little underestimated. But it's also a very useful genre because as public service media, you also have to reach targets of budget, of course, and benchmarks of a cash flow. So it's also another good reason to say that they are golden eggs in the hands of public service media that can use them in a very successful way. So I would like to come to Claudia now. We know that Arte is a long-time supporter of documentaries in Europe. We've heard it before. And so I would like to hear from you some of the examples that you wanted to bring to us to show these examples, and also why they are important for you, and for you it's kind of proud to present this kind of titles that you're bringing us.
Yes, I think when we are talking about the golden eggs for public service TV, we have to think about what it's matching with our values. And one point I would like to address, it's diversity and authenticity. So it's really, really important that the stories are coming also from the regions where they are talking about. So. And one initiative we had supported during the last 2 years, it's called Generation Africa. We are talking a lot in Europe and in European news and documentaries about migration. We have all seen the documentaries like Number 387 or others, showing how migrants will come to Europe, showing the problems of migration in Europe, showing the rise of populism in Europe, but we very, very seldomly talking about the fact that 80% of all migrants are normally doing migration in their continent, in their region, and don't go to Europe or North America. And Generation Africa was an initiative of staffs in South Africa, featuring young African filmmakers from 25 countries, no, from 15 countries, doing 25 films, feature-length, medium-length films, and short films. You've certainly seen some of the films who are already finished in the festivals. The Last Shelter was one example, which has a great success in the festivals. Zinda also.
Won CPH Docs. Won the CPH Docs. That was
Yes. Cinder is another one that is quite finished, and they will be all ready in the beginning of next year. It was also a collaboration of the Arte universe. As you know, we are not a unique place, but we have partners in Germany, in France, and in Strasbourg. So all the partners were working on this this initiative. That was also something networking we were talking about in the last panel is very important, also within Arte. And perhaps we have a small look on the trailer, but I think what was important for us that these documentaries are talking about migration from an African point of view and not from the European one, and I think that's something really unique. We'll show 7 of the documentaries on broadcast and all 25 during 1 year on our homepage. So I think this would be one of the highlights of our programming in the next year.
And we can see the clip Generation Africa.
I don't know if my mom is from getting to 20 years.
Amo men findine yan kata Libya ñinen dora kata ñinen dora pour kana family ma ko anim fango barka bin tara ye muta yen soron kasoro man futano na destiny wala ka cross kata Italy barka bin futa je fa mol muta yen soron
Stop! Four! Kasanirraaf eebba barana irratti wanni addaa hin jira jedhee kan isinii kaasuu barbaadu. Kun kaadhate maboodoo waan baaraa yoo yaadde bu'aa hin qabne. Baaraan hin deemnaa? Soo maaliin ibsan?
ለምን ማሰብ እንዴት አይኖርም ወደ ውጪ ወደ ተሻለ ነገር ለማለት ይሄን ስንል ግን እኛ ሀገራችንና ህዝባችንን አንወድም ብለን አይደለም የምንሰደደው because of the ፖለቲካ because of the በቃ ቢሮክራሲው አይመችም
Le jour où sa maman partait, puisqu'en partant, elle avait pris le train. Elle n'a pas agi comme d'autres enfants qui pleurent. Donc elle était comme si elle ne savait pas ce qui arrivait, ce qui allait même se passer. Parfois elle reste comme ça là, tu lui parles, c'est comme si elle ne comprend pas ce que tu es en train de lui dire. Elle ne répond pas, elle reste pensive.
Let me just say that it's great that Arte is really endorsing this discussion that is very active in this moment in the documentary community about representation and ethics. I think it's great that the broadcasters make the space available for this excitement that there is on these issues that is as a responsibility of an editor to endorse those discussion and representation is really great.
Yeah, I think it's very important, but this is also a chance because we have now multiple channels, and I think the possibility to say, okay, we will take 4, 5, 6, so at the end 7 projects we will broadcast, and the rest we want you to give the possibility to see all of them, but on the internet, is something which could really give some strength to the whole project, but also give us some arguments, because you can imagine my director, when we came to him and told him, yes, there is an initiative with 25 documentaries, or at the moment you saw it with 30 documentaries about Africa made from young African filmmakers. Oh yes, interesting. So the possibility to really adapt to the multiple platforms is something which I think opens opportunities.
Some of them will be broadcast on the channel as well.
7. Some will be broadcast, yes. We are in negotiation.
But I'm
Like everybody is in negotiation for slots.
I have to jump in because I was lucky enough also to work helping place these films in film festivals, because, as I said, Marion and I work as volunteers, so we have consulting jobs that pay our bills. And when the production company came to me and said, we have 25 films, I was like, that's too many. What am I going to do with all of these films? It's impossible. And then I saw each, now not all of them are quite finished yet, but I think I've seen 10 or 11 of the collection, and they are extraordinary films. And I feel like you are like, what you say in German, like Luxustraining. You have like these beautiful films and you have to narrow it down, and it's so hard.
You want to show us something else?
The second thing, when we are thinking about the golden eggs, for me it's long life for documentaries, because very often you will, after the broadcast and some festival screenings, they are disappearing. And I have one example which is now 10 years old. We showed it, I think, 5 times on Arte at least. And every month there is one call: could we screen this documentary in a school, in a university, in a festival, well, small festivals now because it's not a new film, but it's really a long life documentary with an important topic, and the documentary is called The Life Bulb Conspiracy.
Can we see the clip, please?
In the 1920s, light bulbs lasted 2,500 hours. Today, they last only 1,000 hours. What happened? A secret cartel was set up in 1924. Its goal, to reduce the lifespan of light bulbs to 1,000 hours. The first nylon stockings on the market were made to last. What happened then?
Was back to the drawing board and come out with something that was more fragile.
They time those things. They time them, so when you finally paid for them, they're used up.
Welcome to the Apple Care Service and Support Line.
What is the dirty secret of millions of iPods that landed Apple in court? The answer is a hidden mechanism at the heart of the consumer society.
Planned obsolescence. The desire on the part of a consumer to own something a little newer, a little sooner than is necessary.
Planned obsolescence has defined our lives for nearly a century.
Our role in life seems to be just to consume things with credit, to borrow money to buy things we don't need.
But consumers have started fighting back.
This was a major case. They thought I was the next Erin Brockovich.
Planned obsolescence is not only about deceiving the consumer, it also threatens the planet through a constant stream of toxic waste.
Posterity will never forgive us. Posterity will certainly find out about the throwaway lifestyles of people in the advanced countries.
Celui qui croit qu'une croissance infinie est compatible avec une planète finie est soit un fou, soit un économiste.
A new generation of businessmen is looking for bright new ideas.
I think business and sustainability go hand in hand. It's actually the best basis to build a business on.
Can we free ourselves from the tyranny of planned obsolescence?
I think it's a fantastic example because it also shows, in a way, the responsibility of public service to support important investigations that can really uncover things that are not in the public domain, because I think 10 years ago it was really new to speak about it. I mean, now we know that Apple is planning, planned obsolescence, but I think at the time was really something that was new and that can really change the awareness and the behavior of the people who become aware of something that they don't know. So it's really an important also responsibility to bring this information and awareness to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's really funny that a documentary about plant obsolescence has such a long life. That's really great. But you already said untold stories. I think untold stories are for public service TV really also golden eggs. Do some agenda setting, looking for new themes, new things. Diversity, so I'm thinking about documentaries like the first Monsanto documentary, which really was something you never heard really before, perhaps in articles, but not in documentary on TV about pesticides.
Still true now, what they're doing. I mean, that's another thing.
It hasn't changed. Okay, not so much impact, but I think it was producing at least a kind of awareness, and this agenda setting, I think it's really important. Documentaries about immigration, global warming, raising populism are also important, but you also have to find new themes and small things people haven't heard about. And another clip I want to show is a film I think you all know, but I really like this example. It's The Cleaners.
Fantastic example. Can we show the clip, please?
Delete. Ignore. Ignore. Delete. Delete.
Ignore.
Ignore.
Delete.
Companies decide what can stay up and what must be taken down.
Delete.
Outsourcing should be disturbing to people in democratic societies.
There are tens of thousands doing this work. All of it's done in secret.
They need to be anonymous because we have a contract signed in.
Ignore.
Our decisions will impact what 2 billion people are thinking.
If you commit one mistake, it could trigger war.
Delete. I've seen hundreds of beheadings. Ignore. Delete. Ignore. Delete. Delete. Ignore. Delete. Delete. Ignore. Delete. Ignore. Delete. Delete.
The danger is that we might lose democracy because we're willing to give it up.
And the last example I wanted to give is a film which isn't an art co-production, but from RTBF, as we are solidary with all other public broadcasters in Europe. For me, it's one of the most important films of the last year, The Man Who Mends Women, from Thierry Michel. about this Congolese doctor Mukwege, who tries to help raped and mutilized women. And the impact this film had is enormous, because they really had a campaign in the United Nations. They spoke in front of the European Parliament, in several national parliaments. I think you had also in Geneva some panels about it. And it's a wonderful film. And
yeah, we organized for the Human Rights Film Festival in Geneva screening at the Human Rights Council of the UN with Mukwege, who was present, so it was very strong.
Yes, and at the end, they got the Nobel Prize. Yeah. And well deserved.
Yeah. Can we see the last clip, please?
Dans les zones de conflit, les batailles se passent sur le corps des femmes.
The people of Eastern Congo, particularly the women of Eastern Congo, have to believe that the military is there for them, not to be an opportunity for abusing them.
Je suis témoin d'atrocités de masse commises sur le corps des femmes et contre les femmes. Et je ne peux pas rester les bras croisés.
The legendary Dr. Denis Mukwege is a two-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee and one of the bravest people I have ever known.
Faites vite! But I don't think any of us can ever appreciate fully what he has meant, not only to the women.
Nous sommes devenus la capitale mondiale de viol à cause de cette guerre.
Il y a des femmes que j'opérais pour la deuxième, voire même la troisième fois.
Les femmes avaient besoin de justice.
Il y a une ligne tunaweza ita sasa leo massacre. Haïkoté na viol, c'est plus que ça.
Nous voyons ce que même un œil de chirurgien ne peut pas s'habituer de voir. Chaque femme est violée. Je l'identifie à ma femme. Chaque mère violée, je l'identifie à ma mère. Et chaque enfant violé, je l'identifie à mes enfants. Comment pouvons-nous nous taire?
Well, I think, thank you so much for these examples. I think they just show us how much we need these kinds of films. You know, our societies need that these films exist, that they are seen, and they can really raise discussions, debates, they can impact people. And so it's so important that broadcasters can support these kinds of films and then spread them throughout their multiple channels, as now you're learning more and more to do. Thank you so much, Claudia. I would like now to come to Caroline. France Télévisions is a long time supporter and pioneer of independent production in Europe. So I'm sure you also have some very bright example of how these films have been helping your channels to make up your mandates and the independent producers to bring to life some very strong stories.
So I've chosen clips that are lighter, so we do a good mix and equilibrium. I just want to take 2 minutes to react to the things I've heard.
Please.
So first, congratulations for your initiative. I think the beauty of coming back again on markets is really to feel that we are all going in the same direction, because 2 years ago there was none of this initiative, either Big Five, a Global Doc, or your initiative. I know French documentaries producers are doing an extraordinary work. They are all together, SPA, SP, and they are the representatives here, and they fight so much, also with broadcasters to really try to find a solution to better finance documentary. So we have a long tradition of that, and we are proud of it, but still, it doesn't always fill the gap for having better finance. The other things that I wanted to tell you is that regarding drama, the reason why the association have both drama and documentary is that sometimes they're complementary. And for France Television, there's more and more events that we are creating with documentary, because we have a drama before and then a documentary after. So it's just creating an event and using the drama for that. So that's a thing. And the last thing I wanted to say is about return on investment. Documentary is really, if we want to talk about capitalistic point of view, is really a good strategy in order to have a good return on investment, comparing the cost of drama and the audiences we can reach sometimes, so it's good to know. But still, it's not enough finance, and we know that broadcasters don't have money anymore. We have big budget for a documentary, 100 million, but there's so many slots to fit and so many programs. So we aired like 3,100 hours of documentary. So still, we need to finance better. So that's your initiative, and the other we're trying to do, I hope, will be the solution. So thank you for that. And Claudia, I just wanted to react on the fact that I feel the same. Telling a story from the point of view of the people who live it in their country. It's much more deeper and much more authentic. So that's what we're doing in our slot 25 Shades of Docs, where we take the best of the international creative documentaries, and we are complementary again on that. There's so many wonderful docs that there's no competition, because the aim is to show as much as we can. And a lot of these docs do have an impact, because they show the reality of a country through very strong characters that are facing a conflict, but they are always in their dignity. And I think that's again the beauty of documentary, to have luminous film on things that are not so easy to see, like the Dr. Mugabe. So for French television, there was a strong willingness to not only take risk, but be the reflect of what our society is living. And we decided, and Catherine Alvarez, which is head of the factual units, really decided to tell our common stories, either our peasant world, or decolonization, or colonization, or geology, and really put it on a flagship channel on prime time. So sometimes it was risky, because when you talk about decolonization, there's very, very strong, powerful, but very hard footage to see. But the good thing is that it was told from not only the people who lived it, but from the younger generation. So your question was how to be inclusive when the younger generation are seeing documentaries, or not seeing them actually. But when they are in the documentary, where they can feel that they are telling the story, they are not only facing experts, cold experts, but they are really in it. So I love the Nous Paysans, which was a big, big piece and super successful. It was like 20%. It was like 5 million viewers. It was really the story of our peasant world through incredible archives. And I could feel during the evening that there was something happening, that people were talking about it, and it really created debate about the fact that our peasant world was undergoing many, many difficulties, but at the same time they had so much to tell about our own stories. So there's a lot of work which is done at France Television at the moment. And the clip I want to show, it's called France, the story of, I don't know the English title. Well, it's so you want to show a lady?
It's the second clip that's...
Okay.
If you want to start with that, it's fine, just that they know it's the second one.
So I'll tell a little about it. How to tell the geology of our country without being too academic, how to be engaging and entertaining, and how not even pronounce the word geology. So that was a real challenge for the producers, Les Bons Clients, and they just managed to do something extraordinary. It was on primetime France 2, and they told like 20,000 years of geology and more through a system of innovation that was very new, and that was allowed us to see that Paris was under a mangrove like a million years ago. Those special effects and the storytelling was so strong that we really reached, like, again, it was 14%, so it was super on France 2. And I really like the fact that they've been seeking so much on how to tell the story while being very, very instructive, but at the same time keeping the balance. And I think it's a role to tell things, but at the same time keep our audience, keep the young generation. And I think the strategy for us, actually on France too, it's really to bring back family on the couch. There's the platform, and the kids are in their rooms, and the parents are in the living rooms, and no one look at TV together. So we are trying to fill that goal and making the family have a common experience, visceral experience in front of a film. So maybe we can show the clip.
Can we show the second clip, please?
A journey through France before humanity. So begins a journey of over 2 billion years through time to uncover the natural heritage that formed the basis of our own history. An incredible journey to the origins of the land we call France.
So spectacular, it's amazing. And it's also interesting that to find also always new ways to tell the stories. Even, you know, the storytelling part and entertaining part it's a big piece of finding the way to reach audiences.
Yeah, and what was very interesting about this one is that on the 10 first minutes, there was a peak, high peak, which means that people were seduced by the innovative proposition. And you know, when you're doing innovative project, you can be afraid of losing your traditional audience. When you try to target the younger audience, you can lose your traditional audience. And the good thing about it is that it's written in such a way that it's embracing the audience. So not only we didn't lose the traditional audience, but we won a lot of younger targets. So that was very interesting. And there's a lot of multi-dispositive with Lumni education, so many different places to show the segments or the film.
You have demographics about your audiences? You managed to get the not that you have them here about this one, but in general, do you know what is your audience?
We have so many details, demographic, so we know exactly if it's feminine or masculine, what are the audience, where they were there at that time, why did they lose at this minute. So I will explain you with the second clip.
Yeah, so it's worse than Netflix. You know everything.
But you know, that's the thing. We had this discussion just before with Marco. Like we are so transparent on our figures, on our audience, on our demographic. That the game is unfair. Because you never know what's are the ratings. So sometimes it's big ratings, great, but how much? So I think that's a real point, because you can't compare if you don't have the figures. So it's interesting because we compare what is not comparable. We compare the figures you show, which is 140 million subscribers, okay. But how many looked at the film until the end? Maybe they just pushed the buttons. So we need more to really understand what's the real situation. And that's sometimes not so transparent. So the next big piece we will work on will be on Eiffel, the visionary man of Eiffel. Because he built 300 monuments around the world that bring it so good technology. Then he could build the Eiffel Tower within 2 years only. And there's a lot of German and Italian content, so I hope it will be another big global doc project. But that will be our second piece of innovation after this one. And the second example I wanted to share with you was actually one sentence pitch. It's the Me Too of prehistory. So it's called Lady Sapiens. And the producers came to me, and it was during the Me Too period, and they say, look, you know, there's so many cliches about the woman in prehistory. There's actually, it's been told through scientific that are males, but now there's a new generation of scientists, And for example, there was a statue that has been discovered, and it was l'homme de Menton, and finally it was la dame de Cavaillon. So they really wanted to do a very, very serious scientific investigation, but at the same time really explain what was the real role of women in prehistory. But of course, they didn't have any footages. So what we did, and that was a big innovation, and that was actually quite risky, we did a partnership with Ubisoft. And you know this video game called Far Cry Primal, which got 40 million users around the world. We took these images, which actually were also designed with a scientific expertise, and they are telling their stories. And for me, it was really moving to see this woman in prehistory, and their look and the animation looks really great. And then there is the virtual reality experience, where you put your gloves and you are really Lady Sapiens. You hunt, you paint, you cure. You really feel this experience. So I think the work we really try to do is, again, about engaging, embracing our viewers, and try to find new ways of telling it. Because this film about France, the geology, it was in front of survivors and in front of big dramas, and still it was super successful. So I think if we want to have this ambition of competing with such big, massive things, we need to take a lot of risk, again, and finance them internationally. But Lady Sapiens that I'm going to show, it took us 2 years to finance it at the international, because people were always saying, we want to take risk, we want innovative project. And then when we were coming with this piece, it was, it's a little bit too innovative. So we had to convince so much, and it was not easy. But then finally, it just hit the record. First for Science Grand Format, 1.5 million, which was great. And the good thing about it is that the viewers you were asking me, so there was a lot of senior public, which was very interesting. There was a lot of young retired, and at the same time there was a lot of kids going there. So it's you know, there's different ways of analyzing our audience. We call, I don't know the English word, public affinitaire, and Arte is doing that also. Public affinitaire, that's the one who will seek for a program, the one who will seek for a thematic, the one who will only go online, the one who will look at program on television. So there's some programs that can help us to reach all this kind of demographic. So maybe we can play the clip, and I will talk a little bit after.
For over a century and a half, experts have been uncovering and analyzing ancient human remains on a quest to understand the story of our Homo sapien ancestors, who migrated from Africa to Eurasia around 45,000 years ago. The typical image of early man is a strong, spear-throwing hero who ensured the very survival of the species. While the study of early woman has been limited, preventing a full understanding of her and instead focusing on her role as a mother. But brand new discoveries and cutting-edge science are a new portrait of early woman.
We operate under the assumption that it's the prime age males that are the be-all and end-all of Ice Age lifeways, and they're not.
No problem, that's fine. So my last point would be that it's important to take risk, but it's also important, as I was mentioning before, but I really believe it strongly, to really bet on the intelligence of our viewers, because this piece, Lady Sapiens, is really high in terms of information, scientific content, but as long as you are generous, people will take it. And I think that's the beauty, again, of documentary. You can really, really trust your viewers and give sometimes content which is really strong, but people like to learn, and that's why. And we had this discussion with Rai. I think people like to learn, and if I'm confident that there'll be more and more documentary and that they will be successful, because we can see that they like to learn from other countries, from other situations. It's just a matter, again, of storytelling. So
absolutely. Thank you so much for this great examples. This really shows that this ever-changing environment, as we say, is actually creating a very creative and daring ecosystem of production, in which the public service are not only looking for new ways to reach their audiences, but also exploring the best way to reach them with the right content, going in through very sometimes dangerous, as you say, daring and courageous spaces to bring these projects to the audiences. We have only a few minutes left. I wanted to see if there was any questions from the floor before we wrap up with our fantastic ladies who are here with me. Is there anybody who would like to ask something? So you covered it all. Yes, Duilio.
How relevant is when you plan to broadcast this? How is the marketing process? Inside France Télévisions, how do you create the event? You mentioned the fact that you realized that something was happening at the day you broadcast the film on Paysan. But before that, what happened before? What is the process of marketing it?
Well, thanks for your question, Giulio, because I forgot to say some important things, and that was regarding also the OTT. And again, I think we don't have always to compare and be in competition, but there's a lot of opportunities for creating very clever, I believe, partnership with radio, with institution. And there's been a film called Bouche Cousue, which is about the violence children are undergoing. And there was so many partnership with the Ministry of Children's, clips on the radio, and then on the magazine show, there is like a coordination at France Television for promoting this big piece. So there's the info, which is there, the magazines. So everyone is there, like just how to put in this program as much as we can. And there's special evening also. So there was info, who would create a huge debate after. How is our peasant world today? So it's massive promotion, and then there's a bande-annonce. So everyone's feeling it's very important, and then there is on the social networks. So it's like a task force, and everyone's there. And Lady Sapiens, it was massive, but it was it was not us. It started on the social network, and then the feminine press. And for the first time, Lady Sapiens will be told through, and then there was the book, and there's a moment where the communication doesn't belong to you anymore, and that's great. But you have to work in advance with information, with and we are lucky at France Television because we have magazines, and you have the same at TRI, but also doing partnership with other public services. I think, radio and other services.
He's a teacher now, so his services are also accessible on a pedagogical or educational level, of a guy called Freddie Neumann who works in Denmark, and he particularly does this connection of marketing between broadcasters, theatrical distributors and other partners, so they can start promoting the documentaries before they're broadcast or before their festival premieres even. So the seeds are already planted in the consciousness of a national population or a target audience. And this is also unique because the Scandinavians early made marketing money an expense in a production budget. And so that's why they're more advanced, because they had more time to work it out. And this kind of seeing the landscape as an ecosystem holistically, that we work together for the best conditions, I think is the only way forward.
And the last thing which was very important is, again, of building community. Yeah. For example, colonization. There was the younger generation. There was a singer coming from Tunisia, I believe, and she's a very famous singer. So she just did her own promotion of this incredible adventure for her. She said, the first time I'm talking about decolonization in a film like that, I felt it was my own story. So it's like community. So I did marketing studies, and I think documentary is not very well represented in promotion, like not basic promotion, but promotion and impact, and also impact is a key thing. So there's a lot of things to do before, during, and after. And also the replay on New Paysan was also massive, because after the broadcast, the director was invited in all the magazine of France Television, so the replay was boosted. So it's a whole strategy.
And this also shows that the curation that broadcasters can actually do with this content before and after, and maybe the debate, is something that is really unique to the kind of work that you can do on such channels. And so I think it wraps up very well this discussion. Thank you very much to all. I think there is really a bright future in front of documentaries, of golden eggs, and thanks also to the partnership with the very strong broadcasters who support independent production in Europe. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks,
and bringing
Laura.
very good examples. And thank you all for staying. I think now it's time for
Thank you very
a
much.
drink.